All right. So I guess now you understand what the plan was.
Absolutely. At Colts Law, we talk Indianapolis Colts football.
We're going to stick to what we know, fundamentals and technique, 1% better every day.
What's going on, Colts Nation? I'm Lawrence Owen. With me, as usual, Colts Loyalist. And today we have a very special guest. We had him earlier in the year discussing contracts and the salary cap situations and stuff like that. Max Dean from Pan Am Football. Welcome back, my guy.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I've been looking forward to it. Kind of stepped away from the whole content creation for a little while, so this is an excellent way to start it back up.
Awesome. So if you guys haven't checked it out, please go check out the previous one. It was a couple months ago. You'd have to probably scroll through all of my live streams way back in the day. I don't think I have a link to it. But I do have a link to his YouTube channel and his Twitter right there in the description of the video. You just got to scroll down through all the other links that I put in there, much like, my super chat link and my news break. Speaking of news break, guys, I'm sorry, but it's a live show, and I gotta kind of play this because, they pay me to do so. This video is sponsored by Newsbreak. Newsbreak is an app used over 1.5 billion times a month by people just like you to get local news via articles or videos by those who are focused on that specific area. People like myself. Just use the link in the description of this video to download it. Then search a city, state, or someone specific, like myself, Colts Law. Then make sure to follow them so you'll get all the news fresh as it comes out. So it's pretty simple, man. It's free to use, and you actually support us financially. We get paid every time someone downloads that app by using that link and then gives me a follow. I get paid for that, and it's free for you to do it. So what are you waiting on? I got a plug, man. I got a plug. A little bit different the last time I had you on here. So, Max, how's it been?
Man. Gotta make that money.
How's it been since the last time I seen you? I know it's been a while, and you've had some stuff going on in your life.
Yeah, so we are in Romania at the moment. My wife is born and raised Romanian, so we're in her hometown right now, which is a small town. I don't know exactly what to equate it to, but it's basically suburb style in the middle of the Carpathian Mountains, and so it's beautiful. I'm enjoying myself, but it's been an adjustment, and brought my two small kids along. Both are under 3 years old, so they've had to adjust a little bit, and I haven't been doing nearly as much Pan Am football stuff as I wanted to, but I finally just got everything set back up. I got high quality internet, and I'm good to go. So I am in a very good mood, A, to be in my situation, B, to be here, and C, because football is very much right around the corner with less than a week until preseason games start. How are you guys? I haven't been checking stuff nearly as much as I wanted to either.
Well, I was just getting ready to say something. Loyalist and I have been to a lot of the Colts training camps this past 2 weeks. I actually had to back off because I got sunburned so bad that I had blisters, and my doctor was like, you can't do that no more. Like the little tiny ones that go all over your skin. He's like,
Yeah.
no, you got to give that a break. But Loyalist still, out there sludging it out. He was out there yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah, I was out there today too. So,
He was out there today.
not yesterday.
No, not yesterday. Today, and then Saturday or something like that. Yeah. You've been out there a lot more than even I have, and that's amazing. By the way, guys, for those that want to join the Patreon stream, because we will be doing a Patreon stream tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, basically going over training camp and everything that he saw today and other stuff. So make sure that you click that Patreon link and make sure you're a Patreon supporter so you get the link to join and watch. But yeah, lot of football news. I'm just glad football's back, dude. I really am, Max. Football's just.
So am I, man.
My goodness. Nomadic Brian.
I've been watching old Hard Knocks episodes and games from last year, and just like I've been jonesing for it so badly.
Our chat's moving pretty good. Nomadic Brian in here said the last time he hung out with some Romanians, there was a lot of drinking.
Yeah, it's been known to happen. They like to have a good time. They don't like to work on weekends.
Understandable. So let's get to what we brought you in here for, because quite frankly, the Colts have been busy in the contract signings as of late. Got 2 big ones out of the way. Both of them pretty big contracts, and has a lot of Colts fans worried. Mainly the Braden Smith contract, which was over $18 million a year. And then the Darius Leonard contract that was signed just recently for just under $20 million a year. Now, I don't have the details. I don't even know if they're out yet. You may have them. I don't know what's going on. But let's jump into that Braden Smith one. But what did you get out of that one?
Yeah, so for the Braden Smith contract, when I'm looking at a contract for like a big new extension, I want to kind of take a look around the league to see what other teams are doing at the similar positions, because that's really what dictates how much you want to pay a player, right? You want to make sure that you're not overspending to keep that level of quality on your team. And the big one that kind of moved the needle in the right tackle market was Ryan Ramczyk just a few weeks before with the Saints. And so I'll kind of break it down for you and keep it simple to start with. But left tackles make a lot more than right tackles. And guards have traditionally made a little bit more than right tackles. So the right side has been kind of lower on the totem pole as far as the offensive line goes for, pretty much as long as football has been running. It used to be a little bit different when the league was so run heavy, but now that it's more pass heavy, the left tackles are really prioritized when it comes to getting paid. And that's one of the big reasons that Orlando Brown Jr. requested a trade from the Ravens earlier this year. And he said it was because, his dad played left tackle. He really wanted to play left tackle. I mean, there may be some truth to that. I'm sure there is some truth to that. But I have a suspicion that if he was told he was going to get paid like a left tackle but play on the right side, he would have been fine with that. And the real reason is because he had proven he could play on the left side when Ronnie Stanley got hurt. And now that Ronnie Stanley's coming back, he wanted to get a new contract, and he knew that some other team was going to have to be the one to do it, because you don't pay 2 tackles more than $20 million a year, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the basics of it. But there are outlier contracts here and there, and there are various reasons for it. So Lane Johnson a couple years ago in 2019 was one of the few right tackles who got paid like a left tackle, and that's basically because he has all of the skills to play left tackle as well. Jump forward a few years, we hadn't seen really much change. That was the one outlier. Jack Conklin got the big one last year, but even he was significantly lower. We're not talking $20 million a year range. But this year, the Saints went pretty crazy with Ryan Ramczyk, and my suspicion is that largely comes from 2 things. One, they see maybe that there's a possibility he ends up playing left tackle, and there's some stuff in his contract with incentives for that kind of point that's a possibility, not a guarantee. But also because of their cap situation, they don't have the most flexibility, and this is something I talked about before on the last time I was on, and I can elaborate later. But if you can basically do whatever you want in a given year. You can add players and add players and add players. There are always ways to do that, but the more you do it, the less flexibility you have in future years, and you end up getting yourselves in situations like this. And so with the Saints next year, they're not in a good cap situation at all. They've already been pushing things down the line. And with Ryan Ramczyk going into his final year under contract, they had to get something done, or they'd have to franchise tag him, which is fine if you think about it, except when you realize that it's possible that their franchise quarterback could end up being Jameis Winston after the year. They have to consider that as a possibility. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, if there's any chance that happens, 100% they have to use the franchise tag on him, because you can't let a franchise quarterback walk out the door, if you don't have another one. So essentially, I believe that drove the Saints to sign Ramczyk for a significantly higher right tackle contract than anybody else in the league had really been doing up to this point. And it was interesting just because, and the reason I bring it up is because there were a few other right tackles who were up for contracts, and Braden Smith is one of them. Taylor Moton is the other big one. And that ended up driving up their prices as well. So Braden Smith ended up getting, I think, a 4-year contract that was, $70 million. So we're talking about like $17.5 million per year. That would have been right under Lane Johnson for the second highest, and significantly higher than all the other right tackles beside him. But now that Ryan Ramczyk jumped the market up, that puts him in third. Taylor Moton signs shortly thereafter for $17 million as well. So it just changed the whole dynamic of the right tackle market. So it's interesting to see where he came in on. I can talk a little bit more about the contract in particular, but before we get there, I'm kind of curious to see, how are you guys feeling about the signing? Maybe aside from the money aspect, are you guys excited about it? Are you grateful that he's not moving on? Is he a player that you were concerned might move on?
I'll let Loyalist handle that first, since he hasn't really spoken since we started.
Yeah, I'm very pleased. I mean, Braden didn't even allow a sack last year. It is really nice to know that you've got a young anchor on the right side, and not to mention the fact that him and Glowinski, they're on that right side. They really do have a good chemistry. And yeah, the money, I ain't gonna lie, whenever I keep hearing these contracts, I get more nervous. It's all right when somebody else's team is spending that money, but when the Colts start spending it, then I'm just like, oh, crap. But I was very stoked, and I couldn't imagine. I wasn't expecting him to quite make as much as he did. But once you said the Ramczyk situation, it just really sort of muddied the water up. And I'm interested how the front offices deal with that, with these outliers and stuff whenever they're doing negotiations.
Sure. So I can answer that a little bit. The basic idea of a negotiation is, when you're talking about an extension, is I have to offer you enough money and in the right format that you say, yeah, I want to sign now and not wait till I hit free agency, right? Because the benefit of signing now is you get your money guaranteed, and if you get hurt, you have that padding, right? But the other side is that if you hold out a little bit, like you play through your year, hit free agency, then you have many more teams that might potentially want to sign you, and your contract will be dictated by what the market is. So anytime a team wants to extend you, they basically have to be around that market somewhere. So that's why it's important to keep track of what other teams are doing with their players at the same position, because that's going to basically say, this is where we start negotiations. You start a little below and one starts a little above, and you eventually meet in the middle somewhere. So that's basically how that works. And then as far as the details of what they're negotiating over, it's amount per year, which in Braden Smith's case is $17.5 million per year. The total number of years of the contract, so 4 for this one. Then there's the 2 types of guarantees, or 2 general types. One's fully guaranteed at signing. The other is general guarantees that might kick in for injury or for being on the roster at a certain time or something. So, so there's those three things, and then of course the cash flow structure, which is basically, you make all this money, but as I talked about before, you don't necessarily make 17.5 million in each year. You might make more in one year and then less in the next year, and it'll go like this depending on it. And so those are all the things that are negotiated over between a front office and the agent. So I think Braden Smith came in at a pretty comfortable place. I've kind of got a little list of the other right tackles to kind of compare him to, but for just amount per year, he comes in at 3 behind Ramczyk and Lane Johnson. But in terms of guarantees, he did pretty well. Ryan Ramczyk, he was fully guaranteed $43 million at signing, which means, unless he does something super illegal or something crazy like that, he's getting $43 million no matter what. And then Taylor Moton, even though he gets less than Braden Smith per year by $500,000, I'll gladly trade that out for the less in guarantees that Braden Smith has. So in that essence, the Colts did a nice job because Taylor Moton also has $43 million, same as Ramczyk, while Smith has $32. So a significantly lower amount of fully guaranteed money. Now, there are ways that money that is guaranteed but not fully guaranteed, it's like de facto guaranteed just because it's so unlikely a player will get released in certain circumstances. But essentially, the more possible flexibility you give yourself, it's always better when it comes to this kind of stuff, when it comes to, commitments and contracts.
Yeah, I'm starting to look at, especially when it comes to offensive line, that things are starting to kind of to even out a little bit when it comes to contracts and money and stuff. Yeah, left tackle still, the big money maker on position wise on the offensive line, but because you got your 3 techs and your nose tackles and even the other end, you're getting a lot of pressure now from up the gut and over the right tackle. There's a lot of really good pass rushers out there over that right tackle, like guys like the Watt brothers and Von Miller and stuff like that. They always like to come off that side. So you need somebody,
Mac as well.
Yeah, and Mac, you need someone solid there because they're not just coming at you from one direction anymore. It used to be that you knew that pass rush was coming from that left side. The NFL and the teams and the GMs and coaches, they've done figured out we can't let teams know where the pressure's coming from all the time anymore. So you kind of got to have a good all-around line, and in order to do that, you got to pay them. And so, I mean, I get that, the money that Braden Smith was really, really high, at least the per year was really high. But like you said, the guarantees isn't so bad. And, if something happens, I don't think it'll kill the Colts long term if they have to separate ways from them later on. If something, knock on wood, God forbid, happens. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You're just that right tackle is being more and more needed to be high end, just like your guards. I mean, 10 years ago, if there was Aaron Donald out there, I bet the left guard and centers would be paid a whole lot more today than what they were, than what they are now, because everybody'd be like, "Oh no, we need the best there is,"
Yeah, it's a reactive league for sure. So I definitely think that there's a bit of a scarcity of high quality offensive linemen in the NFL. We had a good tackle class in 2020 as far as drafts go, but you can't count on that every year. You certainly aren't going to get it, like clockwork. Even the drafts you think are good don't always work out that way as far as that goes, And I think another thing is that one aspect of team building that I really subscribe to is maintaining chemistry within an offensive line. So you want to make sure that you have, 4, if not 5, and certainly 3 guys who have played together for a good number of years. And every time you insert a new player into that, you don't know exactly how well that's going to work out. And even if it does work out, it takes time to get back, because you're making, all of your protection calls, everyone's got to see that the same way and act as one, And so even though the Colts are almost invariably going to be one of the highest spenders on the offensive line in the next probably 4 or 5 years, or for the next 4 or 5 years, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because these are all young guys that have already played together for a few years and will continue to play together for a number of years. And I'm going to be 100% honest. I have a suspicion that tackle is probably the direction they go in next year's draft. There is the possibility that Eric Fisher stays another year or 2, but I think the reality is that if he plays well enough that you want to keep him, considering all the other guys, you probably won't afford him. But it's tough to say exactly. But I think that, you want to find high quality at that cost-controlled draft pick price, So I have a suspicion that that's where they'll turn to kind of, re-up the talent and youth, but keep that cost a little bit lower.
Yeah, I mean, well, when it came to the GM Chris Ballard, when the draft happened, they said, we were watching for left tackles, but what they considered a quintessential left tackle in the draft, the quality didn't fall to where they thought that it was worthy of at the pick, whereas the pass rush, which was also a need, did, and that's why they went that direction. And every time it got to them to pick, that, it was just that the tackles were grabbed, and it kept lowering the quality of, what they had on their big board at that time. So, they were going BPA rather than reaching for a need, is basically what Ballard is saying, and I'll go with that all day. Get the best players you absolutely can, especially if it's still in a position of need.
I have a question real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay, in quarterbacks, you always see, it's not always the best quarterback gets the highest contract. It's just the last quarterback to come in rotation for signing and stuff. Sooner or later, that has to level out. I mean, when do we start paying these players for where they fall in the progression or capabilities? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, you already see that. It just depends on the situation. Like Braden Smith and Taylor Moton are a perfect example. Neither one surpassed Lane Johnson because neither one, they're both good players and both quality players, but I don't think that a guy who's really watching the film of all the right tackles in the league can say on a consistent basis over the last 4 years, either one of those players is really better than Lane Johnson, right? I think there's a clear difference between those players. And so you'll get guys who kind of set a benchmark, right? And same thing with Patrick Mahomes for now. He's at that $45 million per year mark for quarterbacks. And you've seen a few guys get signed since then. You've seen Deshaun Watson get signed after that. You've seen Dak Prescott get signed after that. You've seen Josh Allen now signed after that. None of those guys were able to surpass that mark. So there are players who kind of, when they get signed, they are so clearly the best at their position or among the best at their position that, the agent can't convincingly say we should be paid more. But what will happen is 2, 3, 4 years down the line, probably like 3 years at most really, is when someone who might technically not be as good of a player will still surpass them just because the salary cap goes up. So it just depends. If it's like a comparable player, like one might be a little bit better according to some rankings or some people's opinions, they, might get a little bit more. They might one up a little bit. They might one up a little bit. But They're usually by relatively small amounts, but you can definitely set like at least a temporary ceiling on that.
Okay, before we get going, I want to shout out the people that are in the chat right now, just making it blow up. Real quick, shout out to Ant Rogers, Brandon Wood, Dabney Offerman. Oh my goodness. Hey, what's up? Bring the Juices in here. I already mentioned out Nomadic Brian. All you guys, definitely. Appreciate each and every one of you. Larry Brown, see you're in here as well. We'll get to the chat in a little bit, but I think it's time to move on to the other side of the football, and that's the defense, where Darius Leonard signed that monstrous deal. And there's a lot of people out there that want to argue that an off-ball linebacker shouldn't be paid that much. In my personal opinion, I think you pay your playmakers, and Darius Leonard is one of the two big playmakers that the Colts have over there on that defensive side of the ball. And I don't know, was the contract by Warner, did that affect Leonard's contract? I'm curious about that. Do you think it did, Max?
Absolutely, it did. But I'm not sure who has which agent. They may have been in some kind of communication. But generally, when you have two superstar players like that, and you both are getting extended at the same position, or more or less the same position, they know kind of what's going on with the other one,
Yeah, real quick on that was, I don't know about the agents, but for example, like you're talking here, Darius and Warner, they said they were daily in contact, just keeping each other apprised of what their contract situations were and stuff.
Yeah.
And Darius was just like, I'm not signing first. You're signing first.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's that whatever the first, because this is what I was talking about, right? So these guys there's no one that's clearly better than the others. They have different skill sets, but they're both very valuable and both very effective at what they do. And the position they play is quite similar. But because of that, you can pretty much guarantee that whichever one signs second is getting a little bit more. Right? And, if you're willing to wait, if you're willing to wait, then you're going to get that little bit more. Comparing the two contracts I can do in a minute, but the linebacker market hadn't shifted in a little while either. Back in 2019, the Jets are my team, so this was not their most shining moment, but they gave a pretty terrible contract to Mosley, yeah. And then shortly thereafter, Bobby Wagner beat that out by some metrics, because he was, again, C.J. Mosley is a very good player, but at that time, Bobby Wagner was the clear and obvious best linebacker in the league. So when he was up for his extension, I think was even like a month later, or a couple of months, because Mosley was a free agent. But when that came up, he was able to surpass it a little bit. But because Bobby Wagner was the clear best, and the C.J. Mosley deal was generally looked at as bad by most GMs and contract negotiators for teams, no linebackers had even come close to that for a couple of years. And guys had signed, but they were signing for much less. I mean, just last year, I think the highest off-ball linebacker signing was an extension for Zach Cunningham for the Houston Texans, and he hit 14.5. And so that's still $3 million less than Mosley, $4 million less than Wagner, Wagner, yeah. And so, they hadn't really been touched, but we kind of knew with the way that Warner and Leonard had been playing that they were going to surpass that, and whichever one signed first was going to affect the other.
Awesome. All right, so do you have? I haven't looked. I don't know. Has his contract details came out yet?
Yeah, I have them for the most part.
Okay.
Comparing them to they've been coming out pretty quickly lately. Sometimes Sometimes they take a while, but I do find that the extensions that come later in the summer are usually a little bit quicker because they don't get lost in the craziness of free agency. Sometimes you do wait a little bit. But just looking at these, comparatively to the other linebackers, we kind of already talked about the big ones. But Leonard has certainly the most guarantees out of any of the big ones, aside from C.J. Mosley, and nobody even comes close to him because that was a previous GM with the Jets, Mike McCagnon, and it's absurd. I mean, you're talking about like the average fully guaranteed sum for linebackers in the past basically 3 years has been in the mid 20s. You're looking at 23.5, 24.5, 27.5. And Leonard was able to put all of those to shame by a little bit, 33 million fully guaranteed, but Mosley 2 years ago still 43 million. And so I don't know if that there's really a perspective on that. But if you're not really familiar with it, because it just sounds like numbers, but that's a lot more. You know what I mean? You're talking about almost 100% more than what these other guys are getting. And so that's an example of an outlier contract that people just say, okay, that was a desperate team. No one else is going to pay you like that. We're not going to negotiate based on that. You know what I mean? Even if you're better. And so Leonard ended up getting the most guarantees of any other player, at least in terms of fully guaranteed at 33. So he falls kind of above those other guys, but still significantly below what you would consider to be quite bad. And then it's a 5-year extension, and I'm looking at it and it looks like he's fully guaranteed through 2021, 2022, and then he has some fully guaranteed money in 2023, such that it's extremely unlikely he would be cut, just because the would be cost prohibitive. So he's like a lock for the roster for 3 more years at least,
Yeah.
basically no matter what happens.
And that kind of falls into what you were talking about on your show when you're talking about guarantees with players, that even the Patrick Mahomes 10-year thing is pretty much only really guaranteed for 3 years. Players only ever get a really actual fully guaranteed 3 years before something in the contract allows an out, right?
Yeah, it depends. There's what are called vesting guarantees. Mm-hmm. So if a player is on the roster on a certain day, that will basically activate more fully guaranteed money. And so, there are only generally like true full guarantees through 2 to 3 years. And 3 years is like superstar. Those guys are the ones that get, the 3 years. But depending, there can be kind of, I guess you would call it structure in the contract that makes it so that it can be quite difficult to move on from a player even longer than that. I haven't looked at Josh Allen's contract at all, but certainly Patrick Mahomes, even though if you look at it right now, it only looks like there's fully guaranteed money through a few years. To actually release him would just really be pretty devastating to your salary cap, even beyond that, because you have these vesting guarantees that just kind of continually activate. I call them rolling guarantees when they just keep happening 2 years out like they do. So it just depends on the player, and that was I think a pretty good concession by the Chiefs to lock him in for such a long period of time, because you can see, I think I talked a little bit before. I did a video on it on my channel, but I'm not sure if I talked about it when we had our other contract talk or our other salary cap talk, and that's that the Mahomes deal, it's so long that you can't really compare it just by amount per year to all the other contracts, because it's 10 years compared to the general contracts, which are 4 or maybe 5 at most. So you can compare the first half of his contract basically to the other ones. And so, other quarterbacks have already far surpassed what he's doing in the first half of his contract. Even Dak Prescott and Josh Allen are surpassing that. And so it's only a matter of time before quarterbacks are surpassing his total $45 million average. And that's why it was, I would say, even a masterstroke by the Chiefs organization to pull that one off. If he's willing to do it, you do that all day with a player of his kind of talent. It's not something you can really do very often because he's Patrick Mahomes and who else is, but...
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, in 5-6 years, they can renegotiate, right? I mean, if the market goes really high.
They can, but, there are always outlier situations, but one thing that's really important with teams, and you'll see this with things that seem really trivial, like, for example, Trey Lance was holding out of training camp for a couple of days, and Zach Wilson did too. I don't know if you guys caught any of that, but essentially it's over such a small piece of contract language, which are called offsets, right? But the point is, the reason that they're being fought over is because teams do not like to set precedents, even for important players, if they can absolutely help it, because it makes it really hard to negotiate for other players when you don't want to make that same concession again, And all of this stuff it's like you would, if you're not a negotiator, like as a major part of your job or your life, sometimes you think that it's just like, okay, this is what the market says, this is what I'm willing to pay, this is what I'm willing to pay, and we'll meet in the middle, and it makes sense. But that's not really how negotiation goes. Like, especially with big money like this, there's a lot more ego involved. And so even if the agent knows there's a clear and obvious difference between this player and that player can still get their feelings hurt by you not treating them the same as the other player we were just talking about, right? And so what happens is that player digs their heels in, they get frustrated, they start to talk in the media, right? And so all of this negotiation stuff that you think is just so straightforward, it starts to just be a huge pain in the butt. And so agents know that whatever concession they can get out of the team that they have not yet set a precedent for is a win. And then teams know that whatever concession they make that they haven't had a precedent for is a loss, right? So that's when you get caught in these little minor things. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because you say, well, they can just renegotiate in a few years. But Patrick Mahomes might be an exception, but teams do not like to renegotiate with many years remaining on contracts because that sets a really bad precedent. And every player who has 3 years left on their contract, 4 years left on their contract, it's like, okay, the market went up $2 million. I want more money now. We saw something like that with Xavier Howard. If you've been following that contract holdout, which is exactly that situation, is basically he was the highest paid corner for a very short amount of time, but he won up that market by like this much. And then the market jumped up significantly after that over the next year and a half or 2 years, and him being one of the best in the NFL, he's like, well, now I'm underpaid. And so the Dolphins set a dangerous precedent by basically paying him. Generally speaking, teams do not want to do that. Again, Mahomes, he might be the one exception where teams are comfortable doing that kind of thing, but generally you want to treat all players the same when it comes to certain things like that.
Yeah, I'm still shaking my head over the Xavier Howard thing. But real quick, I got a super chat. I know you guys don't see it. The super chat right here from Ross. Guys, thank you so much, by the way. It's $2 super chat. But thank you, Ross. Have you talked on the Colorado Rockies debacle yet? Now, obviously, I don't watch baseball too much. I know that they like baseball a lot. I'm lucky I even know that the Rockies are a baseball team. I actually, while he was talking, I looked it up and realized he's got, in quotes, dinger. And I guess they heard someone thought it was a racial slur or something like that, and they were calling up a mascot or something. But no, we haven't talked about that because that's baseball and we're talking football. But since you super chatted, I had to cut into my stream. Thank you, Ross. It's all good.
Hey, Max, I got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Something that really surprised me with the Darius Leonard contract was the years. Was there some gain other than just security for the player? I mean, because normally the Colts go 4 years, and with Darius going with the 5th year, I was just interested if there was some wizardry or something that's there.
Teams always prefer to have more years of contract control, right? Especially in those final years, because they're generally not guaranteed once you get to the end of everything. So if you go through 4 years of new contract and you don't want him on your team anymore, it's usually not a big deal to either A, release him, or B, say, hey, you've been a big part of the team. We don't want to release you, but we'd like to, basically cut your salary, but say it nicely, and do that, one or the other. So that was probably something that the Darius Leonard team, like his agents and his people, acquiesced to get that nice high average per year and that nice high $33 million guarantee, right? So he's a young enough player that there is a possibility that he will be effective in his 5th new year, so 6 years from now. And the Colts say, look, if that's the case, we want to have the control. We don't want to have to re-enter negotiations with you in 4 years. We want to re-enter negotiations in 5 if we want to keep you around, So that's basically it. If the Colts could do 5 years with all their players, they probably would, but it's just not worth the battle for some of them.
So
do they ever sit there and think, okay, we've got player A, B, and C, and this is when their contract falls? I guess, is there any concern looking at other contracts as far as how long to make, your big players' contracts?
Well, certainly. I mean, there's a couple of ways that you want to do it. One, you kind of want to hit a window. If you feel like you're on the cusp of really competing for a Super Bowl, you want to make sure that you've got a few of your core guys who are under contract for the same period of time. The one other one is you don't want too many of your star players to hit free agency, at the same time, because then you have to, get into situations where you're like, well, we've got to focus on negotiations with this guy because we can't really start the other ones until this is done. And then we've got 2 guys that we would want to use a franchise tag on. So that means we have to, rush negotiations with one, or whatever the case is. So there are situations where you use the length of contract for one player to influence the length of contract for another. But again, that's all in the negotiation as well. I mean, you have things that you dig in on that are really important to you. Then there's things that you want, and then there's things that you don't care about. And then basically what happens is you stay dug in on the things you really care about. You try to keep everything that you want, and then you act like you care about the other stuff so that you can make concessions along the way and get to that point, right? So it just depends on how valuable it is to the team, And I think I see offense very differently than I see defense when it comes to constructing your roster, especially with the salary cap. And that's offensively, consistency is a good thing. Consistency within the offensive line means that those players get to have maintained chemistry, and then consistency with a wide receiver or receiving core, I should say, and the quarterback. It helps really build chemistry as well. Timing is a huge part of offense. And so if you want to keep those players together for a longer period of time, I think that's a good team building strategy. On defense, I don't think it's necessarily the same. I think what you want to do on defense is essentially find players that are very effective that you feel like change the game for you, and then not worry about keeping everybody. because one of the things about defense is offenses will figure you out, basically over the course of 2 seasons. And so if you keep a bunch of the same players who have basically the same skill sets all together for 3-4 years, then offenses are going to know how to attack you, and you want to change, but you've built this defense around what these players do well, and then you're asking them to change. And so my nothing is an absolute rule, but generally if you have a good offense, you try and keep it together, and on defense you keep your pass rushers and then your special players, and then you kind of rotate different types of skills through your defense with the draft. So I think what the Colts looked at was, they said, okay, so we're keeping our guys together on offense, and we have this game-changing superstar on defense, and if we can't keep everybody on defense, we're going to continue to draft them. We're going to continue to rotate through, and we just got to make sure we keep those really special players like Darius Leonard. So that's kind of the way that I interpret how they're approaching their roster. So, 4 years versus 5 years for him. I can't jump into the mind of Chris Ballard and say exactly why that was important. And honestly, there's one other thing. The Colts don't do a lot of signing bonuses. Generally, they do what you call cash to cap, which is essentially what you pay a player in a year is essentially what their cap hit is pretty consistently. And they don't do a lot of proration, which I had talked about last time I was on, which is where you pay a guy a certain amount in 1 year and he gets the money, but it affects the cap over a series of years, which is how you see the teams like the Saints and everything and the Eagles manipulating the caps. Like the way they say that is, they're paying guys now, but accounting for it in the future. The Colts don't do much of that, but they did do it with both of these contracts. And you can prorate that money for up to 5 years from the end of the beginning of the contract when you sign it. So 5 years means 5 years worth of proration, and it's evenly split. So I think he had a $20 million signing bonus, so that's $4 million per year spaced out over the cap. Whereas if it was only over 4 years, that jumps up to $5 million per year split out over the course of it. I'm not sure if that necessarily was a big concern of theirs, just because they don't do it often, but it's possibly something that went into that being kind of a sticking point for getting that done that way.
Do you think that the prorating both those big contracts between Leonard and Smith had something to do with knowing that you were talking about, you don't want to go into a year where you need to sign a whole bunch of people, and because of their great 2018 draft, that's exactly what's going on, right? All these guys are coming in needing to be signed. Darius Leonard and Smith and maybe Naheem Hines. Luckily, we were able to throw the fifth-year option on Quentin Nelson, but that Quentin Nelson thing is coming due next year. Do you think that proration has something to do with that as well?
Well, I think a little bit. What I think it more has to do with is that the Colts have a pretty good team right now, and one of the ways that I think proration is the most effective is, okay, so when you have a free agent contract, so you're starting from year 0, or you're starting from year 1, and it's a 4-year contract. When you prorate the money, it's evenly spaced out over the 4 years of that contract, and it's just chick. When you do an extension, which was the case with Smith and Leonard, you have at least 1 year still remaining from the previous contract, right? And so even though in the negotiations, this 4 years, let's say it's 4 years, we're talking about Braden Smith, this 4 years is what you're negotiating over. And so like when the news comes out, it says, 4 years, $70 million, that's what they're talking about here. But this year still exists. However, if you decide to do a signing bonus, that proration will start this year. So if you have cap space to spare, you can actually basically front load just a little bit of that money a little bit forward. And so if you have the cap space to spare now and you want to keep a bunch of highly paid players together in the coming years, you can set yourself up a little bit better off in the future by paying just a little bit more now. And I think that's a great way to do it. And that's one of the things is I know the Saints and I know the Eagles, they can do all of this stuff to keep adding players and adding players and adding players. But to me, the best way to really, or one of the best ways to really use this proration technique is to not try and save money now and push everything to the future, but actually use what free space you have now and save for the future. And I just think if you have a really good grasp on what you're building, then that's the way to do it. And I think one of the things about the Saints and the Eagles is that they're able to do all this stuff, but they get themselves into very reactive situations. They start to sign whoever becomes available. They start to make trades for whoever becomes available. Whereas with the Colts, and I think there are other teams like this, they have a very clear plan of what they want to do, and I just like it. I do. So I think that could have been part of it as well. Their decision to, do signing bonuses, that is.
Thanks for joining the stream, LA Rams. Don't forget, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, tag that notification bell so that you are notified next time I go live. Don't forget to check out Max Dean on Twitter, a Pan Am Football, and the link also to his YouTube channel here. I do have one question. I've seen that you were like this loyalist.
But... I don't mean to be rude, but I have an emergency. I have to go. I'll explain later. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one.
Best of luck.
All right. I guess it was a real emergency. Good luck to him. I hope everything turns out okay.
Yeah.
Let me know. So my question, which is on a lot of Colts fans, now that you've seen the contracts and kind of how they're rolled out, and you know what the Colts salary cap is somewhat looking like. Now, obviously, in 2023, when that new TV deal drops, it's going to change a little bit. But the Quentin Nelson thing next year, how bad is that going to be on the Colts? Is that going to cripple the Colts? Is that going to be something that we're like, well, okay, so we got all these guys signed up. Now we got to scrape the bottom of the barrel for anyone else?
I think it's going to be okay. I think they're going to make it work. But there are a couple of options. One is they could do the exact technique which I was just talking about, where I don't remember exactly how much cap space they have left, so I'm just going to pull it up right now. But because he has 2 years left on his current contract, including the fifth-year option, they have those 2 extra years to add proration into, and especially this one. Let's see. They have $7 million in cap space, right? So they could absolutely use a little bit of that to lessen things on the back end. And I think next year is probably, let me see what we've got here. Yeah, I'm not really worried about it, to be honest. They've got $7 million left this year. If they wanted to use a little bit of that, they could. Next year, they've got a projected $60.5 million, according to Over the Cap. So that's plenty. I mean, the big question really for me is what's going to happen with Carson Wentz? Because if you don't have a veteran quarterback making a lot of money on your roster, you can pretty much do whatever you want, almost. And so the question is going to be, is he going to play well enough this year that they want to, make a move with that? He's going to cost them, $27 million on the cap next year. So, and a good chunk of that is guaranteed. But, that's the only thing that I really want to consider, right? So if they don't have him long term and they turn back to the draft, then I wouldn't even worry about a thing as far as the Colts salary cap is concerned, even with the signing of Quenton Nelson. And it will be a big contract. He'll probably set the benchmark for the guard market, which has been going up as well. But, if they do end up getting Carson Wentz back partway through the year and he plays really well, and then he looks like he's playing well through the next year as well, then that's going to be an extension that they're going to want to do as well. And so that will change the dynamic of their team and their salary cap situation. So, that's the one that I would concern about, because I don't think that when it comes to signing players to big contracts, you're never really going to be hurt by signing a superstar that's really reliable and really consistent like Quentin Nelson is. You're only really hurt when you sign a player to a huge contract that bombs out. And it's all the more worse with a quarterback because they're so expensive. Mm-hmm. And when they're bad, they dramatically affect how your team plays as well. So, that's really the thing that I'm keeping my eye on. And I know I'm not telling Colts fans anything they're not already thinking about, but yeah, I wouldn't really worry about Quentin Nelson, but they might not be able to draft a tackle next year if they have to go back and draft a quarterback. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this year's about. We got to sit down and see, and I've had this argument all day today earlier before we got on this about Wentz and even the backups. We got basically a redshirt quarterback and a rookie out there sharing first team reps today, and they're both doing well against a top 10 defense, mind you. Both doing pretty good, but it's practice. We don't know what they're going to look like. We got to wait and see what live reps are in preseason and regular season games and stuff like that. And then, of course, Wentz and Nelson, who both had the surgery 7 and 8 days respectively. 7 and 8 days ago, they had these surgeries on their foot. They're out there, no boot, no nothing, walking around with no limp at all. Just walking around the field, both of them. Just a week out of surgery, and I'm sitting there going, well, that looks. I guess Reich was so impressed that he was like, "All right, Wentz, it's your go," even though he was joking about it. Your turn to take some reps. But yeah, we don't know what's going to be like. That's the one thing. I think the Colts are a very similar situation to Dallas when it comes into the quarterback situation. It's kind of an unknown. We have a kind of an idea what to expect. But they're both coming off some serious stuff. One guy's coming off of a really bad season with a really bad team. The other guy's coming off a terrible injury, So it's kind of, I don't know, but Dak's making a whole lot more.
That's true.
All right. Yeah. So, guys, all right, I'm sitting in here, wanted to say what's going on. Let's see, I still got 20-some people in here. Appreciate each and every one of you. Going on an hour now. Where is Feet for Fish when you need him? He could be great insight for this foot doctor thing. You're right, because he's actually a foot doctor, which is weird. He's a guy who follows me. Comes in, talks, he's an actual foot doctor. He's commented on some of the Wentz stuff that I've had. And he was saying that, it was that type of injury where if everything is clean, that he could come back before the season even starts. So that's good. What's up, Toxic Tommy, Kid City? Appreciate you guys being here. I'm hearing some buzzing in the background. Is that me?
I don't know. I'm not hearing it, so maybe it could be coming from me. Do you hear it?
Oh, I'm hearing a really bad buzzing, but it could just be me. My headset does some funny things sometimes. Anyhow, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss while you were here, while I had you on the show?
I think we mostly hit it. you know, when it comes to these contracts, you can. Every different structure, base salary versus signing bonus versus whatever the case is. But I think that for a talk show, given the broad strokes, really talking about where their players fall in the Colts roster, and then within their marketplace as a whole is the best way to do it. But I do think in a much more deep dive on the channel, but I also pour videos and I use a lot of visual aids because you're just talking about a lot of numbers. It can be hard to follow sometimes if you're not actually seeing what I'm talking about. So if you like that stuff, please check out my channel. You can follow me on Twitter as well. But that being said, if you want more of that detailed stuff, or if you have any questions for me, you fans of Lawrence here want me to dive deeper into some particular aspect of something like that I haven't thought of, next time I'm on, just let me know and I'll absolutely do that. So
okay, so I understand what you were saying, but I am getting in the chat where it is on your side. Your mic is pretty bad. Yeah, it's
okay, I'm gonna mute it right now, and you tell me if it keeps going.
Okay. Nope. It's gone. It's gone. All right, guys. So basically what he was saying, if you guys have any cat questions or anything like that, make sure you go check him out. You can always message him or something on his channel on YouTube. Comment on his videos. You can also go to Twitter at Pan Am Football. You can see both the links in the description of my video. Great guest, very knowledgeable. If you have any ideas, specific videos or something that you topics that maybe you want to know a little bit about, maybe it's a good idea. I'm sure he's probably a lot like me, where not all of my ideas come from up here. Sometimes they come from you. So hit him up. I see he's agreeing with me, but he just realized he can't agree with me because his mic's off. Yes, ain't electronics wonderful? Isn't that what Toxic Tommy's saying? It happens. It happens to the best of us. But I appreciate you, Max, for being on here. Thank you so much. We hit that hour mark before things started going south. So that was great. Until next time, please don't forget, smash that like button, hit subscribe. If you're not subscribed, tag that notification bell so you're notified next time I go live. And also, don't forget the share button that's right below Max's picture there. And until next time,